Hello and welcome to In the Making, a series of virtual conversations from North Bennett Street School where we connect with a range of new voices, fields, and perspectives. My name is Kristen Odle. I'm a staff member and host of In the Making here at NBSS. America's first trade school, North Bennett, was founded in 1881 by visionary educator and philanthropist Pauline Agassiz Shaw. Today, we're known globally for our range of programs and courses in hand-based craft and trades, which help folks learn new skills and achieve meaningful careers. We also partner with like-minded organizations from schools and museums to nonprofits and community service orgs, such as the Fuller Craft Museum located here in Boston. Which brings us to our program today, In the Making, Grab a Chair. All things chair today, as you can see behind all of us. We're joined by Beth McLaughlin, Chief Curator of Fuller Craft Museum, Julie Muniz, Founder and Curator of Chair Aware, and Art Leman, a furniture making student here at NBSS who recently was part of the renewal and refurbishing of a 100-year-old chair plucked from a literal trash pile, which we'll see towards the end of this program. So I'm going to do a screen share and let Beth get us started with From Where I Sit, which is currently on view at Fuller Craft Museum here in Boston. And I'm going to navigate this from my set, so everybody just bear with us. And now it's disappeared. There we go.
Great.
Can everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kristen, so much. And thanks to North Bennett Street School for organizing such an interesting event and for inviting me to be a part of it. I'm really so thrilled to be here to talk about From Where I Sit, permanent collection seating, which, as you mentioned, is on view at Fuller Craft Museum. It opened in September of 2020 and will run through February 21st of 2021. We are open. We are located in Brockton, Massachusetts, and hopefully we will remain open through the next several months. So before I roll into talking about some of the objects, I wanted to just give you a little bit of insights into how the show came into being. It was first developed this past spring, shortly after the museum shut down due to COVID. And shortly after the shutdown, we realized that the exhibitions that we had planned for summer and fall were likely going to have to be pushed out to 2021. And this left a gaping hole in our schedule with little time to plan something new, because typically it takes 3 or 4 years to plan a show, and here we had 3 or 4 months to do that. But faced with this challenge, our solution was to use our permanent collection. We have these works on site, and by accessing the works in our collection, it would keep our costs down, which certainly during a pandemic is always a good thing. But what's even more than that, we have some of the best examples of contemporary craft in our collection, and we're always seeking ways to bring them out from storage and to bring them into the galleries and to let people engage with them. We have a digital archive as well, so I was able to do all of the research and development from the comfort of my own home. And as I was working at home and trying to think up the scope of the exhibition, I started thinking about the objects that were around me in my home at that time. My coffee mug, the desk that I was working on, the chair that I was sitting in. And I started thinking about how our relationship with these objects had become kind of complicated during the pandemic, and by being in quarantine and by not being able to leave our homes. More than ever before, we had come to rely on these objects to support us, to sustain us in difficult times. Yet, being at home so much, we really had no escape from them either. And that was certainly true for chairs, the objects that we were likely spending much of our waking days sitting in, eating in, watching TV in, what have you. So this line of inquiry of my own happen to dovetail beautifully with the fact that we have an extraordinary collection of seating furniture in the collection. And thus, From Where I Sit was born. Okay, oh, thank you. Yeah. The exhibition consists of 16 chairs, 3 benches, 1 stool, 1 maquette, and each one of those demonstrates how a seat can really be so much more than just a tool for sitting. We also have 1 sculpture in the exhibition, Leo Sewell's Seated Lady, which is a wonderful sculpture made entirely out of found objects that assert the act of sitting. And this group of exhibition objects, while all centered around taking a seat, are very dynamic and equally dynamic as our relationship with the things upon which we perch. Some of the furniture embraces foundational utility. Others take a more sculptural approach to blur the lines between form and function. We also have in the show seats that reference the natural world with organic imagery. We have other forms that conflate Eastern and Western sensibilities through design and narrative references. And the show also includes some communal benches that invite collaboration and conversation between sitters. And there's even a small bench maquette that demonstrates early ideation in the creative process. So I could certainly talk about all of these works for hours, but I know I've got limited time here, so I've selected just a few to zero in on. And the first one is Gary Knox Bennett, his Chinese platform chair number 3, Late Oaktown Dynasty. And I'm sure many of you in this program that are attending know Gary. He's a celebrated American woodworker, furniture maker, metal worker, and artist. He's best known for his whimsical and inventive forms that incorporate unusual materials and innovative designs. The chair you see here, which was created in 2005, it's composed of Douglas fir, beads, gold leaf, and it has a machine caned seat. And next slide, please. The path that brought this chair to Fuller Craft began with Gary's solo exhibition in 2008 that was called Call Me Chairmaker. And from that exhibition, the museum received our first Gary Knox Bennett for the collection, which is here on the right, titled Chair number 915. This is also in From Where I Sit. And the Chinese platform chair was later acquired through a 2009 fundraising gala at Fuller Craft. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. The Chinese platform chair, which we see here on the right, is one of 15 in his Oaktown series, which is named for the local moniker of Oakland, California. And that's the city in which Gary has his long established studio. The chair's inspiration was rooted in Gary's research for a 2006 Peabody Essex Museum exhibition on Chinese furniture, which was called Inspired by China. And this show required the participating artists to make an object in response to their very extensive collection of Chinese furniture. And, you know, before this project, I think Gary would have told you that he had very little interest in Chinese furniture, but after, he became quite intrigued with the design and the workmanship and the cultural traditions. Specifically, he was looking at the elevated wooden platform seat, often with cushions. He also was drawn to the clean and simple aesthetic and to the organic elements that is often found in Chinese furniture.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yeah,
you
sure.
mentioned there's beading in this chair. Where is it exactly?
That's a great question, because I just took the media information and yeah, I'm going to have to run down and find out for you. But yeah, isn't that funny?
I do love this asymmetrical organic shape in the opening there, which I think is what you just referenced.
Yeah, so Gary was really drawn to the incorporation of organic elements into Chinese furniture. And we see that here, as you mentioned, with this mountain, climbing up the mountain form on the top of the seat back. And then also he has the cloud cutouts that are at the base of the seat. And just as an aside, I actually worked with Gary long ago on his very first iteration of Call Me Chairmaker when I was out with the Oakland Museum of California. And any curator or museum professional that's had the pleasure of working with Gary can attest to what a memorable experience it is. So one of the top memories for me in my career. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to take a look at Christina Madsen's window seat bench from 1984. It is composed of Padauk and holly, has a holly inlay. And Christina is a more local furniture maker. She's based out of Western Mass. Christina graduated college and then went on to work with David Powell at his Leeds Design Workshop in East Hampton, Massachusetts. And she worked with him for about 4 years and then became an instructor herself at Leeds and later launched her own furniture making business. And this bench was commissioned for Fuller Craft Museum in 1984. We used funds provided by the New Works grant that was awarded by the Massachusetts Council on Arts and Humanities, which we all know today as the Mass Cultural Council. And it was one of several objects that was commissioned with this specific funding program. And ultimately, that paved the way for our transition to a contemporary craft museum. So I consider this, really such an important part of our history as a craft museum and really representing that transition. Okay, and the impetus for the window seat stems from Christina's interest in early 19th century window seats. And she so kindly provided some photos and some magazine catalog images in her file that shows the inspiration images for her. And she included those with the commission, which is always great. And clearly we can see the influence here. She also cites her specific interpretation as relating to two of her earlier pieces. The rails and the legs are similar to an early hallway table, and the carved seat, which we can see in the next slide, comes from a dining, this is the carved seat of window seat bench, but it was inspired by an earlier dining table that had that same fluting in the central section. And I love the diagrams that she provided. So carving for Christina has always been a pretty big part of her work. This focus began back in the early 90s when she traveled to Fiji on a Fulbright grant. And there she studied with Makiti Koto, who's a master carver in Fiji. And working with him was really seminal for her work. And here we see on the left-hand side some of the carving that she did while she was in Fiji working with him. And then on the right-hand side, one of the paddles that Makiti was creating at that time. She also cites her background in textiles as formative in her practice. As a young child, she learned lace making and sewing from her mother. And I think this early inclination for handwork and precision certainly paved the way for her current furniture making practice, specifically all the intricate pattern working that she does in the carving. And she's even been known to make these connections between the rhythmic pace of carving and the meditative acts of textiles, of stitching and knitting and crocheting. And she's still going strong today. She's working out in Southampton. She was recently recognized by the Furniture Society with their 2020 Award of Distinction, which I think is very well deserved. And then finally, we have Vivian Beer's Red Rocker #2. Probably one of the sexiest rocking chairs I've ever seen. I think it's just incredible. Many of you likely know Vivian. She's a renowned furniture designer and maker, currently based in New Hampshire. Her wildly expressive furniture, constructed in both metal and concrete, very often conflate the sensibilities of industrial production and design with the aesthetics of contemporary craft. This work here is constructed from formed steel and automotive paint. It was commissioned in 2009 by Fuller Craft Museum following the loan of the original Red Rocker that we had in an exhibition called New Now, 10 Makers for the New Millennium. And the original Red Rocker was not available, so she was kind enough to work with us on a commission for Red Rocker #2. It has Vivian's trademark curves, sleek surfaces, its saturated color. It radiates this electric energy that Vivian's so well known for. And she has a great quote that I'd like to share with you about the color and her choice of color for this rocking chair. She says, Red Rocker was a hint of subtlety within a not so subtle color range. I knew it had to be a saturated red, but not quite a lipstick color. I settled on one that is based in violet range rather than a cadmium red. It's a tonal range that has been used on a number of Chevy muscle show cars. So it's a combination of muscle and cosmetic. Lipstick and muscle cars have a lot in common. So I love how she's making these connections between these two very seemingly unrelated items, hot rods and cosmetics. But despite those references for Vivian, she really considers her work a counterbalance to industrial production and design. She certainly includes these cues of mass production, the curves, the auto paint, the slick surfaces. But each one is handmade by her and each one is one of a kind. And she hopes that this approach will yield objects that combine both nostalgia and progress. And then we've got some great process shots here of Vivian's. We have what she does is she'll do a cardboard maquette to get the proportions correct. Then she hand forms and hammers the steel out of the sheets. And then the next slide, I think, will show us even some more. Yeah, and then she uses an English wheel, which is a metalworking tool that forms compound curves from flat sheets of metal, such as aluminum or steel. And then off to, and there's Vivian working on it, doing the fine finishing work before applying the auto paint. I think that might be the last slide.
I'm so interested to know how many times or how many tests of finish and color she tested out before she landed on that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question, though. I know that color is a really important part of her work. And I'm sure that I imagine that there would be a lot of experimentation to try to get there. So yeah, so that was my last slide. That's just a little brief look at some of the works, and from where I sit, like I said, I could continue to talk about all of them for hours on end as I sit here in my own office chair thinking about my relationship with the chair that I'm sitting on. Yeah, and I look forward to hearing from Julie and Art.
Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
And for those who are joining us right now, this slideshow will be a part of the recording. So if I'm moving too fast or too slow, not to worry, you'll be able to traipse back through it. Oh, there was one more.
That's the same one. It's just the lighting, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
one more slide. Yes, yeah.
That's cherry red.
Yeah, very sexy.
Yeah. So we're going to jump over to Julie. And Julie, I'm just going to try to pace with you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, so my name is Julie Muniz, and I have an Instagram account called Share Aware. And I was actually asked to do an Instagram takeover of the Fuller's exhibition from where I sit. And it was really a lot of fun. But I do post a lot about chairs. I post about the design as well, but of course, chairs are such I think they're a really important piece of industrial design, and of course also, craftsmanship, and designers really respond well to chairs. And I think it's because you can really say a lot with such a ubiquitous object that we all instantly recognize. And so, so I was asked to put this together, and I just sort of picked a few artists that I really love. And I'm sure if you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure you've seen some of these pieces before because I do post them. But I was really looking specifically at people that are artists and designers that are using chairs, not necessarily as functional objects, but more as works of art, or using the chair as a reference. So we're going to be looking at kind of questioning what a chair is. And I think what all of these artists are doing, is basically they speak to issues of consumerism. They speak to issues of this dichotomy of man versus machine, man-made versus kind of industrial made. And they also really speak to a lot of issues of what worth is. If we're taking something that was thrown away and creating something new or something valuable out of it, what is our perception of worth? So I put together 4 artists that we're going to be looking at. The first is here, Bert Lochner. He's German born, but he lives in Vienna now. And he uses a lot of industrially designed material in his work. He's done a couple of series with chairs that we'll be looking at. This is from his Monoblock series. But he's also used pieces like IKEA and other things to kind of re-emphasize this idea of, this man versus machine sort of aesthetic that he's creating. So his Monoblock series is really exemplifies his humor. And you're going to see that in some of these pictures that we show. The Monoblock, of course, is such an iconic object in so many ways. It's a little controversial, I know, because you either love it or hate it, but it is one of those pieces that instantly, the moment you see this plastic garden chair that everybody has probably had or owned at one point in their lives, you instantly have associations with it. You think of it as kind of maybe cheap, maybe disposable, kind of not exactly a designed object, but certainly has been, used by a lot of designers. And the thing I love about the Monoblock is that it really does have all of these it comes with a lot of weight, being such an object that people think of as a throwaway object. It has all of these associations with it. And some artists, not just Bert, but other artists have used that, creating it out of, finely carved wood or ceramic. Bert has actually taken the actual Monoblock and then he kind of does stuff with it. So you can see here this one that's actually hitchhiking. He's so that's just sort of, and he's put them either in these sort of, environmental areas where you can kind of come across them, but he's also made some of them as limited edition pieces. So if you go to the next slide, that's his Dudes piece, and that has come in a limited edition of 10. So he started making that one around 2011, but he also continues to churn these out, and sometimes they are, the limited editions, sometimes they're one-off pieces, but they always have this kind of irreverence to them, like, why does a Monoblock have to be such a, hated object, where you can really see that it has a lot of personality to it and the way he treats them. I think the next slide, you can also see that he's not only using the Monoblock, he also has done a series using Eames chairs. And this is another one of my favorite pieces. I actually posted this on my account last Monday because it really kind of expressed my Monday mood. But this is his dead side chair wood piece that he's making out of an Eames kind of fiberglass chair, and he's warped it and changed it to create this sort of statement piece. And this one was done in 2017, so a little bit more recent. But you can see how he's taking these pieces that we instantly recognize, so what an Eames chair looks like, what the Monoblock looks like, and you already have these associations with it, but then he's kind of adding a personality to it. So the fact that the chair sort of falls on its face is just very kind of a humorous way of looking at it. He also has taken some Eames chairs where he's taken the Eames rocker and extended that rocker rail out and put 2 chairs on either side, so they're sort of seesawing. So he's really using these pieces to express different personalities. The next artist this is Karen Ryan, and she's a British artist, a designer. She actually trained as a designer. And she started to, as she was coming out of design school, she was trying to figure out how she could reconcile these feelings that she was having of why does the world need another mass-produced chair? And she wanted to create, she wanted to design, but she also didn't want to add to this kind of, feelings of disposability and waste and everything. So she was reconciling a lot of these when she started making what she calls her custom chairs pieces that she started in 2004. So this is one of them. And you can see that she's just taking pieces that she's found. A lot of them are chairs that she finds on the street, abandoned pieces that are thrown away, and she reassembles them into these new creations. If you go to the next slide, you can see some more of her creations. So they're either these assemblages, or if you see on the left there, that's another one of her series. She calls that In the Woods. And there are these amazing kind of built up sculptures with these chairs balancing on top. And they're all found objects. So she feels like she's creating art and creating and designing and using her design sense, but she's not adding to this idea of disposability or adding to the abundance of chairs currently out on the market. And these are all one-off pieces, and they can still be used as chairs. And some of the pieces that we'll look at today can still be used as chairs, or maybe cannot. So they're also questioning whether or not whether a chair has to be functional. While you can sit in these chairs, maybe you don't feel as comfortable in them with another chair balanced on top, kind of this feeling that any moment now it's all going to come crashing down on you. But her work is really unique and wonderful. And again, always looking to find new ways to express, what exactly a chair and push that boundary.
Yeah, am I seeing zip ties up there? Is this what's holding these together?
I'm not sure. Probably using zip ties. I'm not exactly sure how she assembles them and how she holds them together. But they are very precarious looking. So I'm not sure if I would feel comfortable sitting in that, but theoretically it's possible. So I guess depending on how brave you are. But if you go to the next artist, is Pablo Reynoso, who's an Argentinian artist. He trained as a sculptor, but he does a lot of wonderful design now. He's really more focused on the design work, but all of his work has a very sculptural quality to it. So he does, and I don't have a picture of these, but he's also become very well known for what he calls his spaghetti benches, where he takes your typical park bench with the horizontal slats in it, and he takes those slats and he extends them out into this really wonderful, often large and encompassing kind of viney scaling sort of craziness. So it's almost as though the chair is breaking free from this very rational prescribed design that it's been forced into, and is going back to its original organic state. And they're very wonderful, but you give you a sense that he is very interested in this idea of using bent wood and kind of recreating a sculptural object out of what we consider to be a chair. So I had so many slides that I wanted to share, so I had to really pare myself down. So I didn't include one of those, but I did want to include these pieces from his Toneteando series, which he began in 2004. And if you know your Spanish, you know that the ando verb ending is the present participle or gerund ending. So he's basically taking the name tonnet and creating a verb out of it. So he's kind of tonetizing or tonneting these pieces. And he takes the tonnet, the number 14, which is, tonnet is such an important figure in industrial design. And of course, the number 14 is another one of those chairs that you instantly recognize and instantly have associations with. And it's such an important piece of furniture in design history because of the creation of this bent wood concept and the ability to create a chair out of very few parts that could be broken down and shipped very easily, kind of like the precursor to IKEA in some ways. But he's creating these, and he's using this concept of this bent wood and assembling these very, very common pieces in a lot of ways. You see tonnet furniture everywhere, and certainly that number 14 chair has kind of become, almost de rigueur in every bistro you get into. And he's taking them and he's creating sculpture out of them. So they're really wonderful pieces. And I love that they really are commenting not just on, the importance of tonnet as a designer, but also creating individual objects, one-of-a-kind pieces out of a mass-produced object. So these are really some of my favorite pieces. And I have a series on my Instagram called Tonnet Tuesday, where we look at pieces like this, and either they're tonnet pieces or they're tonnet inspired pieces, or they're just bent wood. So they're coming out of the concept that tonnet helped create and made popular. But it's really such an important piece. Tonnet is such an important figure in chair history that I really thought that this was really an important series to look at in our talk today.
I love the flat, seeing, whenever you put something just on a flat plane, it just totally shifts your perspective. I love it.
Yeah, it's really amazing. These pieces really get a huge response when I post about them, because I think people, like I said, you have associations to the tonnet. You recognize the tonnet 14, and you're seeing somebody kind of taking that object that you are so familiar with and looking at it in a new way. So he calls these reflections on the 14. So he's reflecting, or in his, verb, tonnetizing or, philosophizing about the tonnet and creating something completely new out of this industrial object, which is really amazing. And then the last artist, and one more of Pablo's pieces, this wonderful kind of tornado of tonnets, which is really very fun. So, you can see that he goes all kinds of dimensions, from that flat, very, floor piece to this wonderful swirling piece that reaches up to the ceiling. And again, always using the 14, which is great. Then the last artist that I wanted to share is Martino Gamper, also another British artist and designer. And he did a series called 100 Chairs in 100 Days. And he did this in 2006. And this was really not so much, something that a statement that he wanted to make, but it was more of a creative challenge for himself. So he challenged himself to create a new chair every day. And his restrictions, his parameters were that it had to be made with whatever he had on hand at the time. And it had to be unique. So he couldn't kind of repeat a concept or design. And so what he ended up doing was just sort of, again, using found objects, using abandoned pieces that he found on the streets or that his friends had or whatever he happened to have in the studio. And he began assembling chairs, and one a day for 100 days. You can see the range that he does. But he also, unlike Karen, who focuses just on chair pieces, he didn't limit himself to chair parts. So you can see some of the pieces, I think if you go to the next screen, so he's using elements that are from chairs, but he's also using elements from other sorts of pieces. I'm not sure what that red and black chair, what those pieces are made from, but I don't think that they're chair parts. They may actually be, like plastic bins or something that he's cut open. So he's really forced himself to kind of rethink what a chair can be. And is a chair, we think of a chair as, legs, a seat, and maybe a back. And that's what your concept of a chair is. And so that, if we think of that as a chair, then that's kind of a shape. But does a chair have to support somebody, or does it just have to be a shape? So he's really questioning those ideas and pushing in his ideas of, how can I make a chair? Does it have to support somebody, or does it just have to have, 4 legs and a seat? And he's kind of looking at all of that. But the other thing that he says that this really kind of opened his eyes to was this idea of, what do we value? Because again, all of these things are pieces that are coming out of, mass-produced objects or pieces that were thrown away. So he may be taking like the monoblock, which we think of as kind of disposable, but he would cover it in maybe a luxurious leather. And so we're taking something that we think of as kind of trash or cheap, and he's putting it into a very customized, luxurious context by covering it in that leather. So he's really questioning our ideas of worth as well as questioning the concept of the chair. And I think all of these artists really do that. Actually, I think this helps to segue into Art's next piece, which is about finding a chair that has, was kind of thrown away. So I think that's a good segue, actually.
Okay, sorry if I jumped too fast.
No, it's perfect.
I'm just going to, thank you so much, Julie. I'm going to introduce Art. Everybody knows Art. Art's gonna be speaking to a chair that one of his instructors, Dan Fea, picked up on the side of the road in a literal trash pile and restored. So, I just want to jump back to all of our cabinet and furniture making students who are watching upstairs. I don't think that you can get away with using zip ties on your furniture making. just clarifying that. I'm going to turn it over to you, Art.
Thanks. We can't use drywall screws either. Thanks, Beth and Julie. Those are great. It's good to see differing perspectives. Dan and Kristen asked me to talk a little bit about the process that went into turning the chair on the left, which, as you can tell, was a well-loved family heirloom, to the chair on the right over a period of several weeks. These Windsor forms are from a green woodworking tradition, so the wood's not dried, and they're marvels of engineering. So all of the parts work together to create a chair that's lightweight, very strong, and very resilient. As Kristen said at the beginning, we think this chair is somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 years old. They're often made by just a local craftsman or a family member to perform the functions of a seat, supporting someone at a table. Dan was attracted to this chair in the rubbish pile. And first of all, any of you know Dan, aside from being a master woodworker that produces beautiful, beautiful furniture in the Windsor tradition, but also in the practice period furniture that we work on up here. But he hates to see anything go to waste. So he saw this chair laying on the side of the road on his way into school, and he was attracted by the shapes at the top. Most of the time in Windsor work, the spindles that you see, the lighter color wood, are trimmed flush with the surface of the top rail. And this wasn't. You might think that it was someone hadn't finished the chair, but the way they're graduated lends us to believe that it was a design element that someone added to this chair when they were constructing it. When the chair came in, Dan did a little triage process. As you can see, it's obvious that that the chair was something that was held in esteem in whatever family owned it. It was cobbled together and repaired over the years in various ways. The seat had split, which is something that you do see in Windsor chairs. But Dan, in the course of this restoration, labeled each part so we knew where things went back together, and dismantled the chair as a first step toward repairing it. One of the folks here that used to be an instructor is now a member of the administration. I asked her one time why she didn't like to do repair work. And her comment was she didn't like fixing other people's mistakes. And this chair had a lot of mistakes over the years. Some of it's understandable. People needed a chair. They didn't want to fuss with taking the time to disassemble it and reassemble it. So they drove a nail into it, tied it with some string, shot some glue into a joint, and it was functional for their need at the time. But we took a different approach. Dan disassembled the chair, labeled all the parts so we knew where things went back together.
I just want to comment on that. You know, this idea that people just throw nails in, glue, tape, what have you, duct tape. That's what our relationships to the chairs are. It's just pure function.
It's a thing, yeah.
It's a thing, and it's just so fascinating because the students here who are learning to make chairs, it is not a thing. It is a specimen of beauty, you know.
Like all of these objects have stories. I'm hoping, like our intent, before we shut down is to deliver it back to the people that had it out on the trash pile with a note saying, hey, we took this, hope that you can enjoy it in your family for the years to come. I'm hoping that we like at some point get to understand what the story was, because sometime, late 19th, early 20th century, someone built this object and it's been in this family for quite a while. And those types of things interest me, the narrative of the object and where it came from and where it's been. This is a picture of some of the stuff that came out of it. When it was taken apart, there was some Scotch tape, nails of various vintage, string, bits of glue that people had put into this chair. You can see a corrugated fastener up there at the top left. So people had a go at this over several years.
Yeah, this is my favorite picture of the whole chair. This really says the most. It says the most about the life of this thing.
Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So in repairing these, as I said, we took it apart. We needed to glue the seat back up together. So part of this process of restoration and repair on furniture like this, we have to get rid of all the old glue. You can see when this chair was made, the leg tenons didn't go all the way through the seat, but over the years they've worn through the bottom of the seat. But to fix that crack, all of the old glue had to be removed, so it's down to bare wood. You'll see over the next couple of slides some of the jigs that Dan made up to do that. This is the chair in the process of gluing. When one of our goals in doing repairs for these chairs or like objects is to make sure that whatever we do to it is reversible. So in this case, we used hide glue when we glued the chair back up. You can see the cauls that he made to hold the chair together as it was glued. Next slide. He didn't take the spindles off. These are the legs, and you can see we had to repair where old wedges were, but in order to prevent the leg from splitting all the way down its length, I put some hose clamps in place and made some little wedges to fill in and add new good wood that we could then use to wedge the legs into the bottom of the seat.
Art, what kind of wood is this chair made of?
I am not sure. He used oak wedges for this. Typically the legs in chairs like this will be a wood like maple or ash that's strong and resilient. The spindles are oak or another ring porous wood like that that's easy to split. One of the design features of these chairs, rather than sawing a board and shaping it, we split the parts out with the grain. So in each part, there's a continuous wood fiber that goes, excuse me, all the way through the piece. So it makes it very light and very strong. Excuse me, it's very dry in this building. If we were doing this as a strict conservation, project, we wouldn't do things like you see here where we've glued and drilled through and pinned a joint to help it keep its place and stay strong for more years than just gluing the tenon back into the leg.
I'm sorry, let me ask you, and I'll let you catch your breath. It is very dusty and dry in this building, as you can imagine. There's wood dust, and with the heat on, it's just dry. So you're saying that this is not something that you would use in sort of conservation, building, or restoration?
if we were doing conservation work, we'd take a longer time to take things apart, and we would try not to do destructive things here. This is a repair on a vernacular object that was in the trash pile. So it's not a significant historic piece or a piece that you would work on in a museum. In order to keep these joints, because they're very loose over time, people have whittled on them and scraped on them. But in order to make sure that this joint stays tight and helps the chair maintain its form, we drilled a little hole and put a little dowel in that gives it some additional lateral stability. So the chairs all together, and we used a traditional finish. Lance would argue that this milk paint is not necessarily a traditional finish. They used oil paints back then, but it ends up being milk paint is a very durable surface for these sorts of chairs. This one has a mustard kind of color as a base coat, which is seen in a number of these chairs. He left the spindles natural. So there's a couple of coats of this mustard paint, and then this green color over top to give this luster. The finish is an oil. He may have used linseed oil or another drying oil that gives it a little bit of a sheen. Milk paint is interesting. When you apply it, you can sand it down and smooth it out. When it's freshly applied, it's almost like chalk. But over time, it cures, it becomes hard as concrete. I have a friend in East Boston who's got some woodwork in their brownstone that they're refurbishing, and they got down to the base layer, which appears to be a milk paint that was applied. And he's having a miserable time getting it down to bare wood because it's just so hard, and it lasts a long time. So, and this is what Kristen did the day we shut down. We were getting ready to take it back to the people and put it in their driveway with a note. So yeah, still in the store right now.
Right, March 12th, you all, or Dan had just finished this, and he asked if we could sort of put a bow on it because his intention was to return it back to the owners where he found it in the trash pile and leave them to find it, because this is the story of this in the making, is, you know, the story of a piece, and they took this and gave it a whole 100 years more of life, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll last a while. It's a nice little chair. It's
so sweet.
It's pretty and it's well loved, and obviously fulfilled its function for a long, long time. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Art. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to just throw in a couple slides. This is a personal chair. I'm going to throw these into the conversation as, chair as a talisman. This is my own personal chair, which has always been a chair that I do all creative things on: painting, sewing, play music, for almost my whole life. And you can see it's covered in cat scratches, and it's been painted over for, my grandfather made this in 1968. And you can see just the layers and layers of paint, plaster drippings, and it's just a disaster. But, part of this whole story we're telling right here is the innocuous chair. And I bring this into school here to have it as sort of a sentimental act during this talk. And lo and behold, everybody in cabinet and furniture comes down and is like, oh my God, it's a breath stool. This, we just did a talk on this last week, and my mind's blown, So this is sort of to spark our conversation about what these things mean to us, and, a chair as a talisman, and an object that we use for more than just sitting down and paying taxes or doing homework. So I'm going to stop our screen share and open up to our Q&A.
Well, I had a comment before we roll into the Q&A.
Please.
Art, if I send you my home address, there may or may not be a chair outside my house that may or may not be in need of restoration. So
Absolutely.
Feel free to drive on by.
One of my focuses is looking at restoration. Over the summer when we were shut down, I did some weaving projects to redo some barn chairs that we had. So happy to talk.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Julie, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you can do something out in California, I've got a couple too.
What is the chair behind you, Julie?
So yeah, they both need work, by the way. I pick up chairs. I find them in estate sale. Well, actually, I found the one is the Hans Wagner chair, the chair. And it's actually a salvaged chair from the Oakland Museum, was going to be thrown away. It needs some love. And the other is a molar chair that I found at a thrift store for $25. So, but again, they both need work. The Wagner chair is, the seat's all cracked. It needs to be replaced, but it also the arm joint needs to be done, and the back has been up against the Oakland Museum has these like cement walls, so the back was up against the wall.
It's all scratched.
Yeah. In all seriousness, I'll put in a plug for the commission board. We have alumni all over the country.
Oh yeah, please.
So we have a commission board. If you have repairs and that kind of stuff you'd like to send,
oh my God,
feel free to
please
post it.
Send it to
Yes, it's right on our main front page. So if anybody has questions for us, you can type them into the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And a question from Rex in the restoration of the Windsor chair. Do you know if Dan used any of the previous owner's repair hardware, string, nails, screws, anything? Tape?
No, we did preserve all of that material, and we'll return it, I guess. But no, we didn't use any of the myriad fasteners, nails, screws that went in that.
That's amazing. I'd love to put that in a nicely wrapped box with a ribbon as well next to the chair.
In case they need it again.
Yes.
How does Pablo Reynoso's bistro chairs appear to balance on two legs of the lower chair? Does it magically balance, or is it suspended?
I think, I did see that question, and I think there are a series of photographs that I think were very staged, but I also know he does a lot of installation work. So if you think of that one kind of tornado, those are all kind of hung and, installed. So I'm not sure if the one that the person's asking about was, just sort of like magically kind of strung for the photo, or if that's just part of how he imagines them to be installed.
Mm-hmm. Beth, was the standing room only group at the Fuller Craft Museum named by the artist or the collector, and is that artist still active?
Was that the three smaller chairs?
Standing room only?
Which one that was?
I'm not
Those
sure.
are the really small, narrow ones.
Yeah,
those.
Yeah, and I loved including those too, because it's really, none of the objects are allowed to be touched or sat upon by the visitors, but those purely were very non-functional. No one would be able to sit in those chairs. And I love that those are in the middle of the gallery, that we have these non-functional chairs. But those were named by the artist, and I believe he is still active. And those came to us from a collector, Gail and Robert Brown, out in Northern California.
So
yeah,
that may just answer this other question. Is anyone allowed to sit in the red rocker? Have you been allowed to sit in the red rocker?
No, as much as I would love to, but it's funny because we love having that in the galleries, but we always have to think very carefully about how it's displayed, and it's typically elevated pretty high, and yet we still find the chair askew, we still find evidence that people do indeed try to climb and sit in it because it is so appealing. I mean, that's the challenge we always have with craft objects, is they're so tactile and so familiar, and people just want to touch and grab and sit.
Absolutely.
So yeah. No, even the curators don't get to to sit or touch or rock or any of that stuff. But yeah.
That makes me think of quite, like, if you go home at night, do you sort of phantom sit in these chairs in your dreams? I'm just imagining that.
Yeah, it's a lot for me. It's more the adornment. So it's more like looking at some of the jewelry that we're putting out, and wanting to try them on. But
yes,
that's where willpower comes in.
Yeah, exactly. This might be a question for Art. When finding a grubby chair that may have once been a nice piece, before diving into a repair, how concerned should one be about ruining historic or artistic value? Like, that was a vernacular chair, is how you put it.
So if you're really concerned, like here in Boston and around the country, there are plenty of folks who will evaluate a chair and give you an opinion. A lot of times I ask myself personally if preserving it or repairing it so it can be put back into use is better than having it just go to a landfill, which is where it's headed. Right now, I have my wife has a family farm in upstate New York that has a bunch of chairs that I'm evaluating for repairing and restoring. We have to look at them for insect damage, all sorts of things like that for evaluation. But if you're really concerned that it's something that may have value, like an Antiques Roadshow piece that the folks are going to look at and go, "Oh my God, this is the one piece of furniture we've been looking for ages." Then talk to a local museum who can give you a line on people who can evaluate the thing. There are a number of restorers here in the Boston area that have a lot of experience. Other parts of the country, maybe not as much, but there are a lot of places you can call.
Yeah, I mean, that raises the question of, something's value versus something's sentimental value versus, that cost to value repair. I have a plywood cello that has so much sentimental value, and the neck is broken, and I brought it into the school to see if I could hire somebody to repair it. And the answer was pretty much a firm no. It's not worth it. You could buy it, we could, if we donate it to a program, it would be less money to just buy them a new instrument. Yeah. So that's always going to be the issue with, repairing something of historical value.
One of the projects that I have in the timeline, I have a bunch of family furniture from our houses in the South that aren't significant pieces. They have good wood, but taking and documenting those pieces, they're too large for any of our houses that my siblings live in. Breaking those down and remaking some furniture that we can distribute to nieces, nephews, that kind of stuff that they'll actually use. And so.
Yeah, reuse.
Yeah.
This is sort of a question maybe for Beth and Julie and all of us. When you consider pieces as art rather than functional pieces, what are the discriminating factors? The artist maker's intent or your perception? So that is a rich question.
Yeah, it is a rich question. I think it really, it depends on so many different things. I mean, for me, I look at what the piece is, what the artist is trying to say with it, what kind of how it looks. I mean, what are they incorporating into it, and how it's made, the craftsmanship or lack thereof, if they're trying to make a commentary on craftsmanship or industrialization or something. There's so many different factors that come into it, as well as just, what it looks like and whether or not you find it appealing. So many like the Bert Lochner pieces, there's such a humor about them, and there's such an instant kind of, because he personifies, he adds like a personality to them so much. I think people instantly respond to them. So even though it's just made from a cheap monoblock, because he has such a, because they evoke so many different responses, I think that they're important in that way. And the same with the Pablo Reynoso, because he's using this kind of classic industrialized piece of furniture, but he's creating something completely new out of it. I don't know. What do you think, Beth?
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, it really starts the artist's intent and what they're trying to say and what their point of view is. And, how are they coming at this notion of whether it's a vessel or a chair or some kind of adornment. I also think that particularly with furniture making, it has a lot to do with the artist's relationship with material and materiality.
Yeah.
And how much are they really connecting to the material that they're working with, and really understanding the life cycle of that material from, its origins as a tree to the process of creation to the final outcome of a chair and how that's used. So I look at it through that lens quite a bit.
You mentioned what is the monoblock? That's what it's called.
Yeah,
the plastic yard chair.
Garden chair. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's referred to as a monoblock because it's just injection molded plastic. So you have the mold, and they inject the plastic pellets in that and spin it until it all melts into this single block of plastic, basically. So
And that's how they have always been made.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you see the reaction to that, to Bert's pieces, you see that chair, and you automatically can feel sort of the wobble that you feel when you sit.
Wonder whether the legs are going to go like that.
Exactly. Or like pinching your back or your clothing when you
how
sit
uncomfortable they are, or how dirty they are at the beginning of summer when you take them out of storage.
Yes.
Oh my God. Well, and I think that's so true what you said, Julie, how, that chair, and I think it's true of all chairs, especially ones that are very specific and iconic, we all have these associations with the chairs. I mean, for me, as you were talking, I'm like, well, the first thing I think of is stacking them back in my waitressing days. And that's what I think of as, oh my gosh, I remember just seeing how many we could stack upon each other.
They falls over.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and that's such a great comment too, that you said that all these chairs, we come to them from the places that we are in and with our own histories.
Exactly.
And I think, for this form, that's really the basic architecture hasn't changed, in centuries. It really is so dynamic, and the possibilities for expression are so vast, and how we all kind of approach them is so diverse too. It's really interesting.
Exactly. I think that's one of the reasons why people respond to chairs and why designers and architects always are creating chairs, is because you can it is this piece of furniture that has such a history, and everybody has it or recognizes it or knows it, but you can create so much with it, and you can instantly, put down your own philosophy in this one very simple object, and instantly people kind of respond to it because it is an object that we all are very used to having in our homes.
And having so many different emotional experiences. And I mean, just like I mentioned before, we use it to pay taxes, to do our taxes. We use it to feed our children. You use it to write a love letter, to get into a fight. It's everything.
And I particularly love those vernacular chairs, because those are the chairs, I mean, versus a royal throne or something that only elite people are really going to really live with. Those vernacular chairs that kind of everybody has around them, those are the ones that I think have the most kind of resonance And I think that when an artist takes that, an IKEA chair or something and does something completely new or unexpected with it, I think that's the sort of thing that when people really react to.
Yeah.
And that for me personally as a curator, those are the sorts of things that catch my attention.
I have one last question, if any of you have an answer for this. What is a fact about a chair that you have?
Well, in my research, I discovered that Charles Darwin is one of the early inventors of the office chair, because he was the first person to put wheels. He put the wheels on his captain's chair so that he could zip around his space and look at his specimens. So I thought that was really cool.
That's really cool.
Fun fact.
That's a really cool fun fact.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Do you have a picture? I wonder if there's a picture of his chair.
I had not seen a picture of his chair.
I'm going to find one and post one with that.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yes, please do.
I do not, as the chair person, I feel like I don't know what is not known, because it's always kind of just sort of like, oh yeah, of course, right. In my mind. But I do love that, chair is probably, I think it is considered to be one of the earliest pieces of furniture. And if you think about it, the moment, we became bipedal, we had to sit somewhere. So I always think of that. And another thing too, is like when I started Chair Aware, I remember several people asked me, it's like, what happens when you run out of chairs? And I'm like, I'm never going to run out of chairs. Are you kidding? People are always making chairs. There are so many fabulous chairs out there. There's
They sure are here. I just did a stroll earlier, and it's everywhere you go. There's a handmade chair around this building.
Yeah, they're fabulous. They're wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Anybody else? Well, I want to say thank you so much to our guests for joining us today. This has been really fun and wonderful, and I appreciate it so much. Julie, Beth, and Art, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for setting this up. It was a joy meeting you ladies.
Yes.
Same here. Good to see you all.
Thank you all, and thanks for joining us today. To our guests. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.